Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This Sunday's lesson is entitled Two Kinds of Wisdom. It's taken from the book of James, the third chapter, verses 13 through 18. And also we're going to skip over to James, the fifth chapter, verses 7 through 12. Now let's go to James, the third chapter, starting at verse 13, where we're going to be talking about the two types of wisdom. Let us read our first verse, which is verse 13. It says, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you?" That's a question that is asked there. "Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness and of wisdom." Now, in this verse, it's still talking about that of a good teacher. It says, who is this wise person, this wise man that is endued with knowledge among you? Now, let's talk about knowledge versus wisdom. Now, knowledge is just an accumulation of facts and information. Now, we have smartphones, and we can ask any question that we want, and it will give us a bunch of information or facts. Now, facts and information alone, that is knowledge alone, does not equal wisdom. Wisdom is knowing how to apply that knowledge. That is, wisdom is the ability to make right choices in life. So we're going to be talking today not just about knowledge, but we're going to be talking about wisdom. And as I said, it's the two types of wisdom that we're going to be talking about in today's lesson is actually, I'll just tell you, is talking about earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. Now let's go back and look a little bit more into verse 13. It says, who is a wise person? The question is asked, and it says, let him show out of a good conversation. That's verse 13. Now, when we talk about conversation, we're talking about lifestyle, a way of life. So you need to show based on your lifestyle, that is the way that you live, it says his works. So you need to show works that is based on how you live with meekness of wisdom. So that's what you need to show, need to display. We talked a couple of lessons ago about being a doer, and this was in James. Be a doer, not just a hearer only. And you remember that lesson. Now let's go to verses 14 and through 16. And we're going to be talking about the two types of wisdom, that is earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. We're going to be talking about its origin, its operation, and outcome. Now, the first type of wisdom we're going to be talking about is earthly wisdom, and that is in verses 14 through 16. And let's just read those three verses there. Verse 14, but if ye have bitter envying and strife in your heart, glory not and lie not against the truth. Verse 15, this wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. Verse 16, for where envy and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Now, as I said, we're going to talk about the origin, its operation, and the outcome. Now, for the origin of this type of religion, that is earthly wisdom, let's go to verse 15. For this wisdom descended not from above. So it's not divine. It's not from God, but is human wisdom. And there are three aspects of this earthly wisdom. But it's earthly, that is number one, that is worldly. Is sensual, that is of the flesh. And devilish, that is demonic. So it's earthly, sensual, and devilish. That's the origin of it is from is human wisdom, not from above, not from God. Now let's go back to verse 14 and look at its operation. But if we have bitter envying and strife in our hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. So that's his operation. It's now when we talk about envy and strife, strife has to do with manipulative. That's his operational. So that's the type of wisdom that you don't want to operate in. You don't want to operate in that type of wisdom. Now let's look at the outcome of this earthly wisdom. And for the outcome, let's look at verse 16. For where envy and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Now, when we talk about confusion, we're talking about unruly, disorderly. That's the outcome of this particular wisdom. Now, that's the first type of wisdom. That is the wisdom that's not from above, not divine wisdom, not from God, but earthly. Now, let's go to the next type of wisdom is heavenly wisdom. That is verses 17 and 18. Let's read 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Let's also read 18. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Now, let's look at the origin of this heavenly wisdom. It's in the first clause of 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure. So it's from above, it's from God. It's from God, it's from above. This is the real or true wisdom. Now, there are 7 qualities of this divine wisdom. The first thing is first it is pure. That's what it says. It's first pure. Now, anytime we're reading in the Bible, it's talking about these qualities, the element of purity is always mentioned first. So it's first and foremost. The most important thing is that it is pure. That's what it says. That's the first quality. The second one, it then peaceable. Third, gentle. Fourth, easy to be entreated. Fifth, full of mercy and good fruits. 6, without partiality. And 7, without hypocrisy. That is the type of wisdom that is from above. Now, and that is the mark of being a truly wise individual. Now, okay, so we have the origin, which is from above. That's what verse 17 explains to us. And its operation, as we looked at in these 7 attributes, that's its operation. Now let's look at its outcome of true or real wisdom in verse 18. Now, before we read verse 18, we're going to note that verse 18 and 16 are just the opposite. We're going to go back and read verse 16, but let's read 18 now, which gives us the outcome of this true religion. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Now let's unravel this 18th verse for a minute here. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Now, this is an example of sowing and reaping. And you've heard it, you reap what you sow. Okay, keep that in mind. You reap what you sow. So 18 is telling us we sow in peace. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace. And what do you reap? When you sow peace, you reap righteousness. That's what 18 is telling us. If we sow in peace, we reap the fruit of righteousness. That's the results of this peace. Okay, now I said we're going to go back to 16 and look at 16 and 18. So 18 is the outcome of true wisdom, whereas 16 is the outcome of earthly or false wisdom. For where, this is 16 again, for where envy and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Those two verses, that is 16 and 18, are just the complete opposites of each other. Now, the last outline, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to go to James, the 5th chapter. And our lesson takes up verses 7 through 12. Now, we're going to back up for a second here and talk about the first 6 verses of the 5th chapter of James. Now, we're going to talk about that, but let me read verse 7, and then I'm going to go back. Verse 7 says, "Be patient, therefore, brethren." So we see, starting at verse 7, James is talking to believers. He said, "Be patient, therefore, brethren." He's not talking to non-believers. But in verses 1 through 6 of this 5th chapter of James, he's talking to rich non-believers. So he's talking to non-believers in verses 1 through 6 of the 5th chapter of James, but the believers are eavesdropping on this conversation. So they hear what James is saying as to the non-believers, and the essence is, don't let that happen to you. This is what he said. Now, let me clear this up real quick. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Christians being rich. Now, Abraham was rich. Solomon was rich. And one of the persons we're going to talk about in our lesson, Job was rich. So there's nothing wrong with being rich. Don't get me wrong here. But in verses 1 through 6 of this lesson, that's not in our lesson. Let's clear it up again. That's not in our lesson, is talking to the rich non-believers. And the believers just happen to be listening on this conversation. But now we go to verse 7, as I said, is now talking to believers, because it says, be patient, therefore, brethren. How long? Until the coming of the Lord. Now, we don't know how long that is, but it says, be patient until the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the process of the fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Now, in this outline, it's going to be talking about patience, and it's going to give 3 examples of patience. And this is the first example in verse 7, and it's that of a farmer. When it says husbandman, is talking about that of a farmer. Now, and let's look at it a little bit more. The husbandman waited for the precious fruit of the earth, and has long patience for it, until he received the early and the latter rain. And verse 8, be ye also patient, establish your heart, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. So basic saying, he's coming, so wait. And you need to be patient. Just as a farmer is patient. Now, if you are hungry and you want some fruit, you're not going to go out and plant a garden, because it's going to take a long time. First, you got to find out, well, I got to cultivate the soil. I got to plant the seed. Then I go out a week later and I see a little sprout shooting up, and it's going to take a long time. It's got to rain, and the crop got to mature before I can reap the fruit. So if you don't have the patience to wait, you might as well go to the supermarket and buy it. You don't have the patience of a farmer. So this is the first example, that of a farmer is patient. But once the fruit comes, it's precious. It says here, waiting for the precious fruit of the earth, and has long patience. If you want to eat now, you don't have the patience of a farmer, because they have to have patience. But once the fruit comes, it is precious. Now, let's go, and while you're waiting, let's read verse 9. Grudge not one against another, brethren. Again, it's talking to brethren, lest ye be condemned. Now, grudging or griping. Now, we know what happened to those that were griping and were grumbling in the wilderness. They died. So while you waiting, it's just like if you're waiting for something and grumbling and complaining, that's miserable. You don't have the patience. You're grumbling, you complaining about it. You need to wait without grumbling, complaining. It says 9b, behold, the righteous judge standeth before the door. So you need to have the wait patiently without complaining. Now, the second example of that of patience that's given in this lesson is verse 10. Again, talking to believers, take my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and patience. Now, take, for example, Jeremiah. We don't know exactly which prophets they are specifically referring to, but let's just take one, for example. That is Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah prophesied for around 40 years with no converts. They all rejected him. Can you imagine that? for 40 years and no converts and suffering at the same time? So it said, take the prophets. They were speaking, the second clause of this lesson, who have spoken in the name of the Lord. In other words, I'm doing the Lord's will, but yet I'm suffering. And you mean I gotta be patient? If I'm doing the Lord's will, I shouldn't be suffering. And secondly, I shouldn't have to wait. But the example of the prophets that's given in verse 10, they were speaking in the name of the Lord, and yet they were being afflicted. However, they were patient, just like the farmer has to be patient. Now, the second example, that is of the prophets. Even though they were speaking in the name of the Lord and they were suffering at the same time, yet they were patient. And verse 11, behold, we count them happy which endure. And it goes on to say, we have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is pitiful and tender of mercy. Now, Job again is another example of one who was patient under difficult circumstances. If you know about the story of Job, I told you earlier that Job was rich. Okay. And Job lost everything he had in one day. Now, I don't have much, but I would hate to lose the little that I have in one day. And Job was rich, and he lost everything he had within one day. And yet he endured through the circumstances. And even his wife told him, one that you would think that really should have your back. But she even said, you should curse God and die. But Job did not curse God. Job still maintained. And we know in the end, yes, he was made richer. We understand that. But Job had patience. And he said that the Lord is pitiful. I know what the Lord has compassion. And the Lord is tender of mercy. So we see examples of patience. That is, of the farmer had the patience to wait for the fruit. The prophets, even though they spoke in the name of the Lord, they suffered and they were patient. Job, through his circumstances, he had the patience to wait on the Lord. We see here that we need the wisdom from above, and we need to be patient as we work. We need to have patience as we witness, as the prophets did, and we need to keep our trust in God as Job did. We'd like to thank you for watching today. We'd like you to join in next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.